particular interest in this Libyan aircraft, part of Colonel Gaddafi's VIP fleet based at Mytika near Tripoli. The plane, a Falcon 900, which flew from Belarus last week, was this weekend returning from Jordan. This recording was made of the radio communications with air traffic controllers in Malta.
NATO 07, go ahead.
Do you have any information on an aircraft with the squawk 2017, positioned about 85 miles east of our?
7, that should be a Falcon 900, flight level 340, with a destination Mytika according to FlightNet.
Malta's airport has been hosting planes from at least 7 NATO nations. In the island's main harbour, a South Korean destroyer which has been evacuating workers from Libya. Military vessels from a number of NATO countries are just off the coast. With AWACS spy aircraft overhead and a fleet of Western naval vessels offshore, there is concern here in Malta, an EU nation, but one that prizes itself on its neutrality. A former Prime Minister of Malta told me he doesn't believe Western powers when they say they're only here to evacuate their nationals.
They cannot be trusted because if I were in their place, I would exploit the opportunity I have of the strategic position to spy and to do all that is necessary in preparation of any military attack. So it's not a question of evacuation only. They are exploiting also the circumstances for their own ends.
The British Special Forces team, who were captured in Libya, are now on board HMS Cumberland, heading for Malta. It's adding to concern here that this island's neutrality is slowly being eroded. James Bays, Al Jazeera, Malta.
The United Nations has been given the go-ahead by the Libyan regime to send a team into the country to assess the humanitarian impact. And for more on this, let's cross over to Shihab Ratansi in our Washington News Center.
Thank you very much. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spoke with the Libyan Foreign Minister Moussa Koussa on Sunday and urged an end to all hostilities. It's unclear what contact UN officials have so far had with opponents of Gaddafi, though. On Saturday, the newly formed Opposition National Council called for international recognition. The council says Libyan officials around the world who have, quote, joined the revolution, end quote, are considered legitimate representatives of the council. One of those is Ali Irishi, a former Libyan minister, currently in the United States. He's urging Libyan regime officials to follow him and switch sides.
When I announced my defection or resignation, as we may call it, from the regime, I called upon all ambassadors and diplomats to do the same, to announce their absolute and final independence from the regime, but to maintain their positions in ways that will serve the interests of the Libyan people and express the will of the Libyan people, which is, you know, there is now a consensus of regime change. Now people were in limbo because they were representing this vague thing from a diplomatic point of view, which we call the will of the Libyan people, which is the revolution of February 17th. Now there is no longer ambiguity. You are either representing the legitimate representative of the Libyan people, which is the council, or you still swear an allegiance to a terrorist organization that disguises itself as a government.
And we'll get on to the implications for the Libyan diplomatic community in a moment, the international community. But as far as this council is concerned, then it really is just a reaction to events of the last 3 weeks. There weren't any long-held plans for such a council. There was no framework or structure that had been held in place in the event that Gaddafi would be in this position.
Well, let me put it this way. We were surprised by our success. It was all sudden, you know, that this kind of regime has a formidable terrorist organization, and they are ruthless. They have a lot of money to buy a lot of favors, and here are committed young people who decided that enough is enough, and they were willing to put their lives on the line for the cause of freedom, justice, the rule of law, and so on.
And then you suggest, though, that one of the reasons for the setting up of this council is so that the Libyan opposition can speak with one voice. However, already, just in the last few hours, we're seeing divergent positions from different parts of what we look at as the opposition. For example, the Transitional National Council is very clear: no airstrikes, no foreign intervention. A member of the Civil Committee for Misrata Affairs in the West just called into Al Jazeera and he demanded airstrikes from the international community.
Well, they're all subtle differences.
Airstrikes aren't a subtle difference.
No, let me tell you. There is a little bit. Probably they sort of either misspoke or they don't know what these things mean.
No, they were very clear. They said
that's right.
Yeah.
But there is a consensus, and I could send you the communique. That
I have it in front of me.
Yeah, the council is for no-fly zone. And they gave their instructions to our delegation at the UN to request that. Now, whether, of course, a no-fly zone requires airstrikes. Those are not, this is, to me, is a healthy thing. This diversity of views.
But it confuses the international community, who at the moment have a pretty unified view that any military intervention such as airstrikes will probably only destabilize and be counterproductive, not just for the opposition, but also for U.S. involvement in a region where, where perhaps there shouldn't be U.S. involvement.
I'll tell you what the position. But when I request a different thing than no-fly zone, I always say I speak for myself. You know, using my contacts as a kind of a diplomat who worked with the U.S. in their attempts. Now they're failed attempts, and with Europe and Canada. My preference is not no-fly zone, but I commit myself to the position of the Transitional National Council.
Why do you think some of your colleagues in the International Libyan Diplomatic Corps have not joined the Council?
Look, there are people who have reasons that I appreciate. They are into a very tricky predicament. Their wives are still, their families are still at harm's way, and we do not want really to coerce people, and we want to give people all the space to make their own decisions based on their special circumstances. There are some of those, but there are those who have that bond to the regime.
Are you offering them an amnesty, though, if they join?
Well, if they kind of do the right thing by themselves and their people, the politics of revenge, which Gaddafi established, will not be part of the new modern Libya. We're sure about that. Our kids were gallant in battle, but they were also disciplined in peace. Their hostages are treated rather remarkably. There was no revenge killing or revenge beating or anything of that nature. We're not into that. We want to build a modern, tolerant, democratic state.
The views of a former Libyan minister now in the US. We'll have more later in the news hour with more on Libya, including one senior US senator's call for preparations for a no-fly zone. But now let's return to Doha.
We'll speak to you later, Shihab. Thanks for that. U.S. crude oil is at a 30-month high, sitting at $105 right now. It's all because of attacks like this one.